Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 2023 monthly board meeting. We have some folks in the audience, some online. This is our monthly meeting when we hear from our departments and boards and trustees talking about progress we're making in the village month on month and the work we're doing on your behalf. I'd like to open tonight's meeting with a moment of silence. This week, our community laid to rest a former trustee and long-serving deputy mayor, Ed Mankari. He was also a lifetime member of the Cold Spring Fire Company, and we express our gratitude for his service and send our condolences to his family. So if we could just take a moment. Thank you. May I have a roll call, please, clerk?
Mayor Foley,
Here.
Trustee Woods,
She's saying
Here.
here.
Sorry, here.
Trustee Bozy,
Here.
Trustee Fatty,
Here.
and Trustee Starbuck.
Here. First item is opportunity to request a vote to modify or add agenda items. I would like to make a motion to add the appointment of a fifth Recreation Commission member. His name is escaping me right at the moment. James Taylorson.
Jimmy Taylor. Taylorson. Sorry.
May I add that to the agenda? May I have a motion to do so? Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Announcements. I have no announcements. Do you have announcements, clerk?
No.
Except that if you have not, we'll talk about this more under water and wastewater, but we are down to the last push to get the endpoints replaced. There are just a small number of properties left that have not scheduled a time to have their water, their endpoints on their water meters replaced, and we very much need to have that done. So if you haven't, please follow up with the materials that have been left at your house or the calls that have been left on your phones and machines, asking you to call Saks. The dates they'll be in the village are the 15th.
The 16th and 17th, I believe it is. And then the 21st, which is the Tuesday through that Saturday.
Reports from village departments. Would you like to present on behalf of the accountant Jeff?
Sure. One of the things that'll be on the agenda is approving sending the unpaid taxes up to the county. It's approximately $40,000 for 15 parcels. The taxes haven't been collected on, which puts us right about on par where we've been in years past. Budget worksheets have gone out to all the departments with letters today. Michelle and I will be meeting with department heads to go over budgets and with board members for each individual departments. Michelle's been working very hard and diligently, and I cannot thank her enough for taking up the issue of endpoints and getting our systems corrected and identifying problems and chasing these down one by one. The nitty-gritty that's been involved has been incredible, and we couldn't have gotten it done without her. So thank you to Michelle on that. We've got the $14,000 for body cams approved from the Department of Justice, and the revenue and expense statements are in the packets for everybody if there's questions on that.
I would just like to make a comment on the revenue and expense lines. I mean, obviously we're mid-cycle and going into the new budget season. My observation is that we set aside a good chunk of money to get repair work done in buildings and on our roadways, and those have not happened. And I think as we go into budget process, we need to look very carefully at bidding out more. I think, this was an experimental year where we would take garbage off the roadways and facilities crew and see what they could achieve. And I think the answer is they need help, whether it's by bid or adding team members. So we need to talk about that in the budget process. And fire company is patiently waiting for repairs as we are in this building. we have gone, well, you know, we have started the process for work in this building. We've begun the process in fire. We need to move forward and finish things that we've started. Okay, so Jeff, is it a resolution on the back taxes or just a vote? Okay, so I would make a motion to send to Putnam County the list of unpaid taxes so that the county can make the village whole for those amounts. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hi. Okay. Do we have Bugsy? Yes. Roadways and facilities. Hi, Bugsy. Are you giving your report tonight? Okay, I'll give you a report tonight. You have to get to the page. There you go. Are you going to give your report, Bugsy? You've gotten a lot done this
No, go right ahead.
month. Jeez. Come on. Okay, well, so you have been very busy cold patching to get us through the winter until we can take on paving projects, filling the most troublesome holes, right?
Yes, the guys are going out tomorrow.
And you have been doing some of that. You've cleaned out some more catch basins. The one thing that I want to say is will seem like a small detail, but it's a big detail when you think about maintaining buildings over time. This is the first time that all of the gutters have been cleaned on all of the buildings. That was not routinely done before. The water department had the water plant had saplings growing in the gutters. So thank you, Bugsy, for doing that. That will put us
Welcome.
dead as we head into a rainy spring. And I know that that's something that you're looking at regularizing.
Correct.
You also had a meeting last week with Han Engineering. Is that right? You want to tell the public about that?
Correct. I met with William of Han Engineering, and we went over the drainage issue we have along Fair Street, which starts at the brook at the condominiums there and runs all the way out to the swamp. And we also looked into the drain pipe issue that comes down through Mr. Holmes's property along Fair Street as well.
Under easement to the village for infrastructure, right?
Correct.
And then Han did visit Mountain Avenue and Fishkill, and they're putting together a proposal for us to consider what to do next. So thank you for covering that day, Bugsy, when I couldn't join.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's the important one there anyway. Okay, I think we have Matt to give. Matt Krug, Water and Wastewater.
I am here. Hello. All right. So we had a couple of all right. Yeah, so the reservoirs are back up to where they were this time last year, actually a little bit higher up. So that's good. Bacteria tests were all found in good standing. Like you briefly mentioned before, the Badger endpoint upgrade, the second round and final round for the swap outs is coming up. Dates mentioned by Jeff. We had one residential service leak identified and repaired in January. The aqueduct connection, I talked to Paul from Han this morning. Spoke about the insistence on the Mueller hydrant for the flushing there to keep it uniform with the rest of the hydrants that are in the system. But yeah, they're possibly looking forward to starting work on that at the end of the month, according to that conversation, but nothing set in stone yet. We had Harper Haynes upsite at the water plant to inspect, clean, and service the finished water pumps. Check or clay valves. 1 and 3 were in very bad shape. They were brought back up to them, had diaphragms and check valves replaced on the units. So they're up and working great. We still need to get unit 2 inspected, but that'll be during a return visit. The raw water positioners on the positioners that we replaced about 4 or 5 months ago, one of them failed. We reached out to JT Land, brought that in for warranty examination, picked up a new one, put that one online. So the unit's back up in service. And
Matt,
still needs,
Can you tell us, these things are meaningful to you?
Yep.
Can you tell us what a raw water positioner in brief terms?
basically Sure. It's basically kind of what it sounds like. It's a device that sits on top of the valve that sets it in a certain position. So without it holding in a position, it kind of cycles back and forth and lets too much water or not enough water in there and screws up all the chemical adjustments by not.
We have one in place now, and
Yep.
our replacement in place, and ours is being addressed.
Evaluated, yep, under warranty to see if it qualifies for it, which I don't think it should have any issue why it shouldn't, but I haven't heard back on that yet.
Does that have any impact on drinking water safety?
No, we had the valve, like I said, it's we have 2 units that can meet the demand of daily use. The 3rd unit is basically standby to come online when one of the other main units for that day's cycle falls out of the run to do a clean in place process, whether a flush or a backwash. So we can get by with 2 units, which we did for 2 days until we got the new valve. But yeah, no, everything is good on that end.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions from Matt? I would add under water and wastewater that trustee Bozie and I had a follow-up meeting with Tectonic on dams. We also had a meeting with former Mayor Gallagher to review the easements that were secured in 2009 and 2010 that provide maintenance access to the dams. We're looking into other options. That is one option. We're looking into other options, and we also did basically a document review with Tectonic to bring us up to speed on work they had done in the past. They are looking at the Chazen report. Our next step is yep. So that is moving forward as well. Right. Code enforcement. Over to you, Jeff.
Relatively slow month. There were 5 applications received. Greg issued 3 permits on those. 7 COs. I want to take a moment to thank Karen. She's been going through reading out old files and look and see what hasn't been closed out. So some of these COs go back 4 or 5 years that we've been able to close out. There were 2 complaints received, and Greg did a bunch of inspections, approximately 8 inspections. Last month, we had 2 referrals to the HDRB. Fees were rather light, $655 for the month, and we're at 18,000, almost 400 for the year.
And you mentioned earlier a comparison to last year at this time and how that looked.
Yeah, last year there were 7 applications. January, February tend to be very slow on applications.
Police department.
Evening, everybody.
Charge. Hi. Jeff stole some of your thunder with the grant announcement.
Yep, with the announcement of DCJS allocating, I believe it was approximately $10 million to all police municipalities in the state. If you did not have a ongoing body cam program going, they're willing to give you monies towards that. Michelle saw it online. We got a heads up. I think Jeff also had something on it that they sent out to us. So I think it was December we had put in for it, either November, December we put in for it, and we just heard back approximately a couple days ago, last week.
Can you, for everyone's benefit, DCJS means?
Department of Justice Services. So basically, it's a criminal justice system. They do all of when I send up reports to them of the crime and stuff like that. When we do our UCRs, everything goes up to them. The DCJS program, they allocate equipment, monies for equipment that they don't have, that you would get from the state of New York when they put it in. Could be radars, could be now it's body cams, because they would like everybody to get on a body cam program. So once we saw that, we applied for it. Then it was a relatively easy grant to apply for. We just received that. We're able to get $14,000 towards that program. So one shot in the arm deal. So basically it's $14,000 per bundle per camera. After that, the data, the maintenance and everything that is going to be on us. So we're going over that now. I don't know what the money is going to be yet. I'll work with Michelle on that for the end of this year's budget, because I know we did allocate originally beginning of last year monies towards it. So we'll see what we can do with that and going forward. I think it's excellent to get anything from the state, especially the body cams, which I think are very important on both aspects. Safety for police officers and anything that happens whether it be a crime, whether it be any type of incident, possibly a complaint, we can go back and look and see exactly what happened. We'll be working on that, as I said, we're going next further months with the policies and getting everything tightened up, which I will work on with the board, mayor and the board on that.
We also have coming up next week, a presentation from the ad hoc advisory committee on community policing, and their recommendations. That is among it. I would also say, Larry, that last year we pulled back on body cameras in order to make funding available for a collaboration with the hub for mental health response. And now we've been able to recover that as a grant, which is fantastic.
Yes,
So thank you for that,
Yeah,
being patient.
Still work. I still want to keep going full speed with the hub. Hopefully we'll be meeting, hopefully monthly or actually more than that, as we get further into where we're going to go with the program, and discuss what avenues we can go to help out us and them and the community. So, with that being said, if there's any more type of grants coming down the line, Michelle's usually on it, I'm on it. We try to, get whatever we can from the state. Going forward with the calls, we had 63 calls of service for the month of January. We had a little bit of uptick on the false alarms. We normally get on occasion multiple alarms at Haldane, up at the garage. Correct, Jeff? For the fire. I told them, I think they're working on that. They're trying to fix that. That comes and goes. All of a sudden, we'll get like 4 in a row in 2 days. And they're supposed to be hopefully working on that. The other thing was we had a lot of 80 calls out in January. Mostly were elderly people. I guess whether it was during the cold stretch that we had, or just having relatives wanting us to check in on elderly parents or grandparents and such.
So in aided cases and the ambulance,
In case
you attend also.
Yep, we'll go to every ambulance call in the village we go to. We usually get there, and we assist the ambulance if we have to. Most of the time, we get there first, the ambulance is right behind, and then, we'll assist on it with the patient, either picking up the patient if sometimes they've fallen, it's called lift assist, or helping them get the patient into the ambulance. Also, the fire department will usually get dispatched on certain calls. So we all help together. It's also be.
Where does my stuck in the elevator fall?
Assist citizen. That's how that
I'd
falls.
like to thank Connie Tiro for rescuing me.
As long as you were not hurt, it doesn't go down as an aided call or anything like that. It goes to an assist citizen.
In your own building?
Yeah,
That over the last couple months, not a lot, but a few.
Yeah,
We've had a few.
an issue there.
As you can see, the officers that needs assistance was up to 8. That's not an average, but it's not crazy that we assist, and that's assisting MTA, state police, and also the Putnam County Sheriff. We had a couple of calls in Nelsonville.
A follow-up question to Catherine. In a case like that, when there's a repeated problem with an elevator, does that then code enforcement know about?
We keep an eye on it. I know with the only major one that we had on a constant basis is the MTA. And they were always there, and they've been notified that, we have to look into it. So on that one, that's the only really one. It's a constant. Your building or that complex over there, very, very rare. But if it becomes an issue, almost like the false alarm, burglar alarm, stuff like that, the people will be notified to fix it.
I think it's usually when there's a power.
Yep.
Power
drop.
Or something.
The MPA goes out too on a power outage, and then once you go in, if the door closes, and you can't get involved. You have to go down into the, Jeff knows, usually they go down into the mechanic room and they reset it and it opens up. Other than that, that's all I have. Let me just give you the summonses real quick. We had 9 moving summonses and 13 parking summonses for a total of 22.
Any other questions for Larry?
And again, if anybody is going away, please come in or go online and fill out the dark house checks so we know if people are away on vacation.
The dark house check, you keep an eye on the house.
We will go by the house once or twice, every shift, for day to midnight, 4 to 12 midnight. Check the houses.
You, service provision. Justice court. Oops, did I skip fire? I did. Sorry, you've been sitting there all along. Chief Phillips is with us.
Nothing really much to report. We had 16 calls last month, nothing crazy. as always, we're 100% volunteer and always looking for members. So find us on social media or stop by the firehouse or leave a message. Everyone's welcome.
And we have in front of us a resolution related to LoSAP, so fire company members earn points toward service award with New York State by number of calls. We have in front of us a listing of calls attended, percentage attendance, et cetera. And we are asked to accept this information and forward it on to LoSAP.
So
I
it'll
think
go back to the fire company. It'll get posted
They
for
will
30
forward it.
days. And each member then could review it. And if they have questions or they don't agree with it, then they work it out internally. Then it comes back to us for final approval.
Got it. I wanted to take a moment to recognize of the members, the sort of, in addition to our chief and assistant chief and president, who are in the top responders, I should hope that, yes, they are. The top 5 responders in the departments. They are Steve Etta, who drives the truck, Travis Fife, Lillian Mosier, Will Etta, and Tom Merrigan. So thank you all. And would someone like to make the resolution regarding the service award?
I can do it.
Go for it.
Okay. Resolution 04-2023, approving the 2022 firefighter records listing. The following resolution was offered by myself, Tweeps Woods, for adoption and seconded by
Second.
to wit, whereas Article 11-A of the New York State General Municipal Law requires that the list of volunteers who earned a year of service credit during 2022 be approved by the fire department and submitted to the Board of Trustees for review and approval. And whereas once approved, the list must be returned to the fire department so that it can be posted for at least 30 days as required by Article 11-A. Therefore, it is hereby resolved that the Village of Cold Spring Board of Trustees has reviewed and approved the 2022 firefighters record listing. The roll call vote.
Trustee Bozzi,
Aye.
trustee Fatty,
Aye.
trustee Starbuck,
Aye.
trustee Woods,
Aye.
Mayor Foley.
Hi.
Officially adopted today by a vote of 5-0.
Okay, and now Justice Courts. That's proper order. The Justice Report is available online. It demonstrates on our website, demonstrates the income through the court via fines, fees, mandatory charges, total of 5,813, and the list of charges is available on the website. Okay, reports from standing boards. Our Historic District Review Board, do we have a report from them, Jeff?
No, Sean sent an email saying he had nothing to report for January.
Which one?
They had nothing to report for the month of
Oh,
January.
for January. Okay. Been quiet, clearly, with applications and referrals. Planning board has nothing to report. Zoning board has nothing to report. We might get out of here early tonight. Okay, Tree Advisory Board, do we have Jen with us? No, okay. So a couple of things that are important to think about her report is we have a number, as we've all been talking about from pedestrian safety issue, we do have a number of older growth trees in the village that are causing heating. We have asked that board to come forward with some solutions that will allow us to save the trees and make the sidewalk safer. We're meeting on site at one particular tree next week to talk through options. And I have asked them to come forward with a proposal in budgeting so we can try to take that into account. Fair Street is a really excellent example. Mountain Avenue has a number of really huge sidewalks. Also, a little bit of science. You'll remember last year that the Tree Advisory Board, working with Cornell Cooperative Extension, entered into a calorie pear tree rafting pilot project. They're in phase 2 of the project when they remove some of the branches from the successful trees and graft them to another variety in the hopes to create a more hardy, less likely to drop limbs calorie pair. So we'll see you'll see the tree committee out on the street cutting, buying, etc. She says that the trees will look strange for a little while. And we're just gonna have to live with it for a little while. And then they should fill in nicely. So we'll see how that goes. And there is a public hearing for tree cutting requests on village trees. It's actually a request to cut 6 village trees. That public hearing will take place on February 28th. Trees at Mountain Avenue and B Street. Okay, now the part I've been waiting for all evening because it's so exciting. It actually is Recreation Commission. We have identified folks that step forward for service on the Recreation Commission. Feels like there is new energy and life. And last week we approved the appointment of James Curley Egan. This week we have before us Charlie Brooks of Parsonage Street and tell me the name. Taylorson. I'm sorry, Jimmy. Taylorson of Church Street. And Tweeps and Laura, if you want to say a word about those folks and what they bring to the board. I know Charlie, no, it's you who knows Charlie well. She has interest in dog park.
I know both of them, yeah. Charlotte had sent information about, she had activity participating in organizing the Olympics.
Yes.
On her resume that I was pretty impressed by, but she has a lot of administrative experience and she has a kid at Haldane who's 13, 12. So and she has a dog, so she's interested in dog park production, but I think she'll be a really great member. Jimmy, I know from Main Street, and he's the way it came up was that he had mentioned that he had, as a teen in England, in London, like wanted a skate park, and with his parents and a group of teens, they developed a skate park and implemented it. So he's got, experience from early on that would be really helpful for our parks development going forward. So I'm excited to have them apply.
Anything to add, Tweets?
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy, I think is going to be a great addition. He's got a lot of energy. He's got a small little kid who's at school with Birdie, and he's a great, energetic, fun soul, and I think he'll be a good spot on that team. So I'm excited, and I welcome them both.
So would you like to make a motion?
Sure. So I will make a motion. Should I make a motion for both, I assume?
We can do
Or-
that.
Okay. I make a motion for Charlotte Brooks and Jimmy Taylorson to join the Rec Commission.
Second. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
So now the next steps are Tweeps will be meeting with the chair of the Rec Commission to begin the process of proposing code changes that need to happen to make that board more functional and to put more rec and rec, and begin to look at the forming, as Phillipstown did, a Friends of organization to allow us to properly accept gifts toward donations toward work in our parks and in our public spaces. So I'm super excited about it, and thank them both for stepping forward. I do want to correct one thing in Jeff's report under bandstand and dock. He has dock lights have been donated, are in the process of being ordered. They have not, we have not accepted a gift for them. I am working on a proposal to you all for the village to purchase them ourselves and be accountable to ourselves as part of our end of year spending. So, just a correction in his report. Okay. No town of Phillipstown tonight. I don't see a lot of new stuff other than reminding folks that food scraps We're looking for more people to join in food scrap recycling. You can enroll on the town's website at www.phillipstown.com. Also, the other thing that I thought was interesting was the Climate Smart Coordinator did an assessment of 18 buildings, 18 town buildings, pointing at rec center as the largest emissions. It still has oil-fired heater and water heater. Solar panels have been installed there, so things are shifting in the field that all of us benefit from. Okay, the county legislator was not able to be with us tonight. She asked that, give me a moment because I'm currently drawing a blank on what she asked me to report. That she put forward, having been to our meetings now, been able to join our meetings from home and here in person. She put forward a proposal to the county legislature to do something similar to what we're doing in the village and other municipalities are doing across the county. You know, we've sort of scraped our pennies together and made it happen on a $2.6 million budget. She has proposed that the county do it as well, and that was rejected. So she wanted you to know that. On county news, I went home tonight to feed my kids, and the Putnam County Courier was in my box, and I wanted to draw attention to the front page, which says in the upper right corner, rolling in dough. Sales tax collections are highest ever. And then the article on page A3 says 2022 sales tax collections highest ever. And there's couple things I want to pull out there. Putnam sales tax collection totaled 81.9 million last year, up significantly from the 78 million collected in 2021. The overall tax revenue was 16.9 million more than what the county lawmakers had budgeted for 2022. The budgeted amount was 65 million. And Joe Castellano, legislator Castellano, commented that it's 2022 was great when it came to sales tax. And we say, yes, it was. We ask you, please share the growth. We would like to see some of those dollars coming back to your constituent towns and villages. We have plenty of public works that we can be doing for the benefit of county taxpayers. That's what we all are in the towns and villages. This is starting, in my view, I'm speaking for myself here, but this is starting to look like hoarding. $80 million is a lot of money, and we really need it on the ground. So we ask you to please reconsider share the growth. I ask. Do other trustees ask?
Yeah. And to be clear, the Share the Growth program is only asking them for the growth. So that's the 3 million from the last year growth. We're not asking them for all 82 million, just share 3 million with the rest of the county municipalities.
Thanks. Report of the mayor and the board of trustees. Shall we start with you, Laura?
I think everything is kind of ongoing, so doing a lot of work on chapter 134 that will come to the board soon, later this spring. And ongoing work on the dam and some work with New York DOT looking at pedestrian safety.
We had a hugely informative meeting today at the intersection of 90 and 301 with engineers from the DOT regarding pedestrian safety there and improvements. Turns out it's very complex. Not surprising, but there are multiple schedules within the DOT for intersection and paving work. I have real concerns about the condition of the crosswalk, particularly from on the down slope leg of the intersection from St. Mary's to the gas station. It's very worn, there's potholes in the center, and the handicap ramp there, the ADA ramp is at a huge grade and it's cracked and it's hard for people to get out of that crosswalk. there is a schedule for, they call it long line paving, which is what we've seen in the last few years, where they go down the ends, the outsides, and then restripe the white. That happens every 2 years. We had that last year. There is crosswalk and stop, was it stop bar, the term they use, the thing you pull up to in your vehicle. They are on a 4-year resurfacing schedule. That's just painting though, that's not repair. So currently the intention is to come back in this season, 2022, and simply repaint. So we were advocating today for fixing before painting. So they're going to go back and see what they can accommodate in terms of paving the way they did with the school district. It's very clear to me that we need to be very present with the DOT and actively advocating. A couple of things, they're going to provide us with what that actual schedule is. It was a schedule that we didn't know existed before. So now to see how these things feather together, because there is also a capital improvements timeline every 5 years, which we need to advocate to be on. And there is also an ADA assessment and update that happens every number of years. So we've asked them to compile what that looks like for a cold spring in a calendar. It will be approximate, but that'll at least give us a better sense. We also need to understand how that feathers in with lots of other pedestrian programs that we're thinking about. The one thing that was I never noticed before, we did have conversations about, could we have a point in the light changes when all of the traffic stops and it's all pedestrian crosswalk. It is very hard to get that designation. We're told that there were 22 in the last 6 years. There have been 22 accidents at that intersection. Only one involved pedestrian, which doesn't meet the level of rising to that. But they did point out something I have never seen or never paid attention to, and that is when you press the button to cross, there is 5 seconds when both lights are red before the other light shifts to green, so that you have 5 seconds to enter the crosswalk and be visible and present to the cars in theory. I have always thought about that in the reverse, that I needed to wait to be sure the light was going to turn green going the other way. But that is intentional. Those 5 seconds are intentional. One of the things they talked about was extending the possibility of extending it to 7 seconds. And I also asked questions about right on red. We have one leg of that intersection that's no right on red. And what's that possibility? So they're going to come back to us with all of that. We also asked questions about what capacity we have to meter on 301 and what capacity we have to do repairs and other improvements like striping for parking, etc. All of those things we can do by permit. They did recommend that the highway department take out, Miss Bugsy, do an annual maintenance permit that allows a suite of repairs to be done without asking over and over again. So you're clear to do these things for this year. The downside is state owns the road, we pay for the improvements. And this is the case whether it's part of that approval or not. We were trying to explore options for an additional 88 parking spot. That is something we need to repair. We also asked about the intersection for the crosswalk at Oak Street, which has been an area of concern for a lot of people. You can enter it from an accessible sidewalk, but you can't get out of it. And the state expects us to put in the drop. So those are things we need to think about as we're budgeting. Every time we meet with them, we learn more. I feel like we made some forward progress today.
In some ways, it was good news just to say, it was good news to hear that we have more ability to make changes on a state road than I think we recognize, especially through that kind of general annual permit. The bad news is that it puts the cost onus on us without a lot of options, funding options that are coming to pay for it. So I think at least we know.
Now we know.
At least we know what's possible.
Yeah.
And I think it was also just to say on both the no right on red, and I think extending like up to 2 seconds of
Yes.
the hold of, the walk hold, that we could, adopt a resolution here in the village to show that that there's village support for that kind of safety measure, and then DOT would likely, put it in place.
It'd be more likely to fit in place if there were a resolution showing public support.
I have a question. Did you discuss with them, the possibility of having the crosswalk lights just go automatically with the light? So when it's red, then.
Yeah, they don't-
They don't do
They do.
automatic, like as that was my understanding, as a state
Yeah.
policy, they don't do automatic, walk signs. It has to be what they call a beg button, like you have to request it. Well, you can tell that, like, from some walk advocates, that's not the preferred, option.
And the reason it exists in places like New York is that the city has different, right, those are their
They
streets.
have their own rules.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, good question.
we also did ask about striping around the crosswalks
Mhm.
to give more visibility to pedestrians. They actually want them striped 30 feet, not 20 feet, on the state road. That was helpful. And to provide clarity, remember last week or whatever week we were talking about the parking plan, Steve Smith raised the question of that top block of Main Street and what is it that we have the capacity to do in that top block? And he was not wrong. The first 100 feet down from the intersection, because it is within 100 feet of a state road, we need permitting for.
I don't think it's actually permitted. That wasn't
What you understood?
no, my understanding was that their concern is that there could be underground cables.
Which is why they want to know.
So they want to know,
Yeah.
but it seemed like there was
Okay.
a distinction just between want to know
And
and the permit. It was kind of like a call before you dig was the sense that I got.
Got it.
I don't think that we need a permit. But
So
it's
like
concern,
Meters on that block.
No, meters we do need on the upper portion,
But on the
but on the
bottom,
lower one, we're good.
100 feet, we're
Right.
okay.
yeah.
We'll confirm with Nikhil to make sure that Laura's understanding is the right one, and that sounds right to me. I remember him referring to the switch plates. Okay, that was a whole lot about DOT and pedestrian safety. How are you doing on big bellies?
Not so much on the big bellies, but I had a conversation with Royal regarding changes we might be able to make to the contract, but we have to look at rewriting some of the code associated, was that
This is
71?
the letter chapter 29. Is it 29, 92? Jeff?
Couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Littering.
Anyway, so, I've been working on language for that.
Oh, great, awesome, okay. Let us know when you're ready and we'll work with Jeff to get it on the calendar.
We had that conversation.
Excellent.
Told me to get in line.
Get in line, okay? Going on.
So I'm working on still the parking plan and the updates there. Next month, I hope to have a first pass review of chapter 126 and 127, parking and traffic. That will sort of update the code to match our parking plan, but I will mention that, in talking to residents, and we've gotten quite a number of, concerned comments from Fair Street residents. We're rethinking doing metering on Fair Street, and it's, I hadn't really looked at it quite from their perspective, but pulling out of driveways on that street, the driveways are narrow, the street's narrow, and then having cars parked across the street makes it really hard for residents to get in and out. And just having heard that extending the time that it already is would make their life more difficult. I think for the amount of revenue, it's not worth it. So I would love for the board to, discuss or consider or approve. I don't know what we need to do to change that plan, but I would recommend that the board, take Fair Street off of our parking planning, plans.
That's feedback I've gotten as well from folks. There's a lot of concern about that. Well,
I have a question, because historically, the parking is on the north end. Are there less driveways with some parking on the south end? So would less people, would it be easier for someone to get out of fewer driveways on that side of the town?
I think without the village doing major construction to the curb cuts at all of the driveways, because the road is so narrow, imagine yourself in a car pulling out into a 2-car wide street where there's cars parked either side of your driveway or across from you. And I think that at the end of the day, it's just like, unless we do like major curb cuts that give them a lot of leeway from their driveways, it's really difficult.
And the feedback I've gotten is that it's a challenge already with it is parking for the Catholic Church uses one-way parking there. And in those periods of time, the feedback is it's hard at that period of time, please don't extend it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I support the idea of taking it off the table. I just wanted to throw that out as an idea to see if it was possible.
Yeah, I tried to turn it around many ways in my head and just, Peeps, do you have anything to say about that? What do you think?
No, I mean, actually, what I'm thinking about is a couple of years ago, my car getting hit by someone backing out of their driveway into my car. And so I can understand these streets are tricky and there's not a lot of space. So I mean, I think it's fair to address Fair Street in that way.
And
Sorry,
also
well,
note
there's-
that we know that metering above Main Street is a prospect for the future, which we didn't know before. We've got some options that weren't on the table before.
I'd be in favor of also looking at 9D.
Of metering 90, well, now that we know this, yeah.
So, I mean, then those are areas where there's already parking.
Mhm.
Residents, I think, are much more likely to have driveways. They're kind of used for tourists already. Good opportunities for
Yeah,
meter
that's
parking.
wider
Yeah,
street,
I'm in
much
favor
wider
of
street,
13.
too. Good point.
Where are we on below the tracks?
We haven't, Eliza, we haven't talked about that.
Yeah, that would be sort of my stage 2 planning. I mean, there are permits down there, but they barely are used and there's no signage. So I would love to address that area next year potentially, but I want to get this section done and then we can move on to those other areas there's actually a map in the packet that shows like stage 2, stage 3, and it's from the tourist presentation I gave a couple weeks ago.
The visitor management.
Right. So
So it's on the table is the point.
exactly. So do I have then board approval to move forward with Fair Street off the table?
And I think Laura's point of calculating options on
Mhm.
90 is a good
Yeah.
thing to look at.
Yeah.
I actually don't have that in my packet. That's the next piece of what we need to talk about. Go to the second page.
Yep.
Actually, do you want to talk it through? Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So Mayor Foley and I have been also working on the next stages of the state enabling legislation.
Legislation.
Thank you, tongue-tied. So basically, in order for us to expand the parking plan outside of the current inner village or central village around Main Street, we have to get state to enable it. And so we've outlined all of the streets that we expect overflow parking to happen, going up Main Street, down 9D towards Little Stony Point and, up Paulding. But we've listed all of the different streets that we'd like to add on for potential future. Doesn't mean we have to make resident parking on every street in the village, and we haven't made it for all streets, but many of them in anticipation of what happens after the resident parking planning happens down around Main Street in the business district and around on the side streets, like how we anticipate that will push parking out. And also as Fjord Trail sort of gains traction and comes closer, I think that they had reported that 2027 was, they were gonna have the Cold Spring end of the trail done. So I think when that happens, we'll have more traffic as well. So we want to be prepared for all of that. And in order to do so, we want to get the state part done so that we can get this village part done as we can get to it and as quickly as possible.
And so the map that you're describing is available on the village website. We discussed it in public session on the 18th of January. That's, the recording is available online. What we're asking for tonight is concurrence with the board to send this list of streets off to Dana Levenberg's office. The next step is to get assigned a bill number, and then from there, once a bill number is assigned, then we can pass a resolution to officially request the enabling legislation.
I have a question. Am I reading this incorrectly, or are we listing all the streets we already have in this and then adding all the ones we don't?
So that is the way
Because once
they
you
have
get-
asked us to format, is to include as a chunk all of the streets that would be in the overall district. So it's taking the 2015
Okay.
and 18 and amending them to include the larger district.
Okay.
This is the strategy they advised to us. Levenberg's office advised us to put them all in a chunk. So you're correct. It is the 2015 streets, the 2018 streets, and then the expansion, the potential expansion.
It makes sense, I guess. It's just when I did the 18 thing, it was just that section and that was a different.
This is just to get a bill number. So from here, we'll pass a resolution that breaks out individually the identification of the 15, the identification of the 18, and the modification we're asking to make there, which is adding in Maine for residential permits. And then the next will be the new streets. That's how I understand us to be. See, they'll give us more guidance after we have a bill number. That sort of kicks things off. Any concerns about?
No, I'm excited.
Totally
Moving through
supportive.
this, yeah.
Okay, do we need a vote, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to submit to Assemblymember Levenberg's office the list of streets as outlined in the February 6th memo from me.
Second.
Hey, all in favor?
Aye.
1 second.
Yeah.
Fair Street. Not metering, is that a decision the board is making tonight? And if so, you should vote on it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to take Fair Street's metered parking plan out of the parking plan and have it remain as is currently.
Okay. Any discussion, further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Well, you've sat so patiently, Marianne. We have with us, yes, we have with us tonight. Marianne, are you the chair of the Phillipstown Trails Committee?
I am not. I am the former chair.
You're the former chair.
Yes.
Which are the presenter. You're welcome to join us at the table.
Thank you.
You're giving us an update tonight on the resident focused pedestrian trail that you are discussing from Cold Spring Garrison.
Exactly.
Tell us
Yes,
about it.
and I was asked to just really focus on the Cold Spring portion. So, but we can briefly touch on the whole thing, just so people have a sense of what the entire thing looks like. So what I'm updating everyone on tonight is a feasibility study thank you. Okay, perfect, thanks. That we have been working on, I guess, for the past year and a half or so with funding from Greenways. And first I'll tell you a little bit about who the Trails Committee is and then show you kind of some of the plans that we've come up with. So feasibility study, so very early stages. I just want everyone to keep that in mind. Wait, so, okay. So who we are, the Trails Committee is an official Phillipstown committee. And we are asked to advise the town on issues around pedestrian safety and making Phillipstown a more walkable community, a place where people can safely get around, not just in motorized vehicles, but also through biking and walking. So we've been a town committee for about a year or so, something like that, give or take. Before that, our origins were in the community congress process, where biking and walking was actually rated the top priority of people in Phillipstown who voted in that process. So our guiding principles, the things that we think about as we have thought about developing this trail are really neighborhood connections. So how do we connect neighborhoods and important spaces in Phillipstown? How do we collaborate with others in the village and in the town to do that? Equitable and complete streets is a big priority as well. We believe that everyone should have access to our streets, not just people who are able to drive, and everyone should have safe access to our streets. We're also really interested in environmental responsibility, so decreasing motor vehicle traffic, so decreasing greenhouse gas emissions, and also helping people to, build in exercise into their day by moving around their community on foot or bike. And then the final thing is building upon, obviously, all of the assets we already have here. We have a network of trails already. So it's really looking at that and trying to build on that. This is me. Okay. Thanks. So just to show you where we are in the stage of this project, like I said, we're in feasibility, which is really early days, even though it's been a while. So we're just kind of coming up with a concept and exploring whether or not a trail would be feasible to connect the village of Cold Spring to Garrison. So we're here at the feasibility stage working with our engineering consultant, Weston and Sampson, and they have helped us to basically figure out where could a trail go or a path go between the village of Cold Spring and Garrison. It will be many, many years before a trail like this, a path like this could actually be realized. Were we able to put in all the pieces? So this is the overall project area, Cold Spring to Garrison. And again, going back to that community connection piece, the idea here is to link neighborhoods, help kids get to school on foot or on bike, link kids and others to their libraries, grocery stores, shopping, post office, farmers markets. Yes.
So you signal?
Yeah, are we supposed to be seeing something? Because all I see is just the first page of the,
Oh, we have to maybe share the screen with them.
I can see the first page, but there's nothing, it's just says feasibility study for multi-use path in Phillipstown.
Okay.
Is everybody else seeing the same thing?
It's still the first page.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's still the first page.
Maybe try and stop share and start it.
That's what I thought we had to share.
Oh, no. Thank you, Tweets. Bye, Birdie.
you say hello, put the thing away. Sorry, that's better. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Okay, see it? Okay.
Okay,
Yeah, so we were.
this is what I was.
No.
To be bandwidth getting sucked up when we screen share. That seems to be when we crash.
Wow.
Weeps, can you hear us or see?
I can see that, what is feasibility study? I can see that slide. Or I could, I cannot see it now. But it was getting, when she started talking, you went out for a minute.
Well, we're having some issues here and I apologize. This is something with Zoom and not us.
But the public should also know that this presentation is available on our website now. And will also be there for review after. So if Marianne, we need to go ahead and you can show us here in the audience, and it will be available for folks online after. So apologies to folks out there.
I'm sorry, Marianne.
Yes.
No, it's no problem for interrupting your flow.
No, no problem.
Right, let's try it.
Okay, I'm afraid to touch a button.
This takes down.
Okay, see, that was too much.
Is it
Okay.
changing,
Here we go.
Creeps? You
You
see
see
a
a
map?
map?
All right,
Okay.
great.
Great.
Okay, and then also obviously, you know, the concept would be to connect folks in Cold Spring to the rec center. And people in Garrison to the rec center as well, because that's obviously another important community space that's not on this list. So I think there's just a little delay. There we go. Okay.
I'm trying to do it on the wheel. I don't know if that makes a difference.
Oh, okay. So this is something our consultant prepared for us, which just shows all of the kind of challenges that exist in this corridor. There are quite a few. There are wetlands, there's streams, there's challenging topography. Everyone's familiar with it. There's rock walls that come down right down to the road. There are environmental resources. We have Constitution Marsh, which is a sensitive wildlife area. We have variable right-of-way widths along 9D that are still being looked at. There's, historic fences and walls. There are overhead utilities on both sides of 9D and other roads that we're looking at. So, and there's also traffic incidents as well along the 9D corridor. So all of those things are things that, you know, we're taking into account in our planning, and just shows you that it's a little bit of a challenging area to work with. I'm not going to go too into this because we don't have a lot of time tonight, but this is just some traffic data, crash data that our consultant pulled together for us. This is looking at 9D, but 9D obviously has a very high traffic volume and high speeds, and there's a fair number of crashes every year on the road, our road. We've done lots of community outreach and community engagement since we started talking about this several years ago. We've really ramped that up, I would say, in the past year or so as we've been doing the feasibility study. So reaching out to lots of different folks along the 9D corridor and in the area between Cold Spring and Garrison. We've been here to the planning board, the town of Phillipstown, Audubon Society, the Manitou School, many of the important community resources between here and Garrison. We also did a pedestrian survey of local parents who send their kids to local schools and childcares along 9D, so that we identified 7. Including obviously Haldane School, Garrison School, the Nest, Manitou, and others. And we asked parents, do they currently walk on 9D or allow their kids to walk along it or bike along it? Not many do, but the vast majority said they would if there were a safe option. So there's obviously parental interest, family interest in this. We do plan to survey other diverse age groups in our community as well, just to take into account different perspectives. This is just the overview of the entire corridor, which we've kind of chunked up into 4 different areas just to get a handle on these different areas. And they follow, I mean, they're sort of natural divisions. I mean, Cold Spring Village is one area, and then we have the Route 90 North area, the Route 90 South area, and then Garrison as area D. I'm going to focus on area A, but we can certainly talk a little bit about the others if you're interested as well. So this is the Cold Spring area. And what we were looking at here is kind of where this path would originate. And originally we were thinking about linking train station to train station, just because train stations are just such natural focal points in communities. But after hearing a lot of concerns about over tourism and challenges with that in this community, we've thought that it's better, because this trail is really designed for local use, for residents to use to move around their community, that it's probably better to start it somewhere else, not at the train station. And so you'll see that Route A1 is showing a route from the train station that would go through the Foundry Preserve. We have to analyze, different possible routes for this process. But we are kind of recommending not starting at the train station for the reasons I just mentioned. Instead, the trail, we would put the beginning of the trail at Bank Street and Chestnut Street, kind of at that intersection. And then it would go south from there. And so Route A2, where you see the big yellow dot, I think you can't really see the A2 marking just because of, yeah. Route A2 is kind of Downey Oil, Chestnut Street, Bank Street. And then the trail would go over the Foundry Brook and continue to the south. Route A3 is just really showing how we could potentially build something like Sharrows, which is kind of a shared lane on the road to facilitate biking within the village. And it's just showing how you could make a lot of different connections through the village by potentially upgrading, improving, and building a Sharrows type path that people could bike on through the village. So that is sort of what that's showing.
Can you pause for a second?
Yeah, let
And
me,
make clear what you mean there.
so do you see the Route A3? It's the light pink kind of,
Yes.
or maybe salmon color. So it's just showing, that route is showing a lot of potential routes and connections that would connect to like the nest, the school. Sharrows is just a type of path that would be on the road. So it's a path that is shared with the road. So that's what we're looking at.
So
There.
what I see is an area south of Main Street within the village, right? I think I see Constitution, Kemble, Chestnut, Paulding, right? Am I interpreting your map correctly?
Is up there, right, Laura? The school is up in the kind of the middle to left
The north-
corner.
the
You see the
northeast.
yellow dot there, that's Haldane.
And so are you proposing improvements to streets?
Potentially, I mean, it's a concept. This is just a concept. We're not proposing exactly anything right now, but the idea is that if you wanted to improve bikeability or walkability through the village, you could make a lot of these kinds of connections through Sharrows.
Can I add something too?
Yes, please.
And I'll say I'm another community hat that I wear is as co-chair of the Goldstown Trails Committee, which I'm so pleased to be part of. And I think where we landed here was that the consultant identified lots of ways to essentially get to that yellow spot. And what we thought as a committee was that there are people coming from different places, from Nelsonville, from the lower village, from the upper village, from Main Street, that they could choose, it's kind of choose what works best for you to come to the yellow spot. And so I think the Trail Committee is looking less at what happens to the Cold Spring side of the yellow dot, and more focused on how do we especially make the connection south from there and that really tricky spot of the bridge, which is still part of Cold Spring. That's like feasibility study is essentially covering a tiny part of Cold Spring, but it's a really key piece, which is the Foundry Brook Bridge. That's a pinch point. Yeah, where we hear a lot of need. And so not that, the brown one, A1 already exists, right? That's the Foundry Preserve walking path. And then A3 is, I think there's sidewalks in all of those places. So you could imagine that someone could take a sidewalk or take the existing path on Foundry Brook to get to that starting point.
So right now, just to make sure that we're clear what we're talking about, the salmon color represents existing pedestrian ways in the form of sidewalks that could be followed to get to the trail's commencing point at the bridge.
That's right.
You're not proposing village streets as part of the trail. I mean, by default, they're part of the trail because you're walking on them to get to the point, but you're not proposing building out a trail on village street.
No, and it could be that the village looks at this and says, oh, yes, oh, Sharrows, we like that idea when we do more complete streets work.
Yeah.
In the village might choose to, so Sharrows are essentially putting lines on quiet streets to say a bicycle may be here.
Go here. Yeah.
Or we may decide to add a bike lane in parts of the village, but that's not part of the proposal that the Trails Committee is making.
But the concept of sharrows in the village would be how you would accommodate bikes, basically. So people could walk on sidewalks, they can't bike on sidewalks. So if you did want to accommodate bikes through the village, there would need to be some sort of sharrows, which is why that's one of the cons of Route A3. We looked at all these different pros and cons, is that sharrows don't provide off-road accommodations. So it might be something that that the village decides, or we decide is not really viable, and that sidewalks would be the preferred route for people to get to that starting point.
What does off-road accommodations mean?
A sharrow means you're still sharing the road with the cars. So it's not a separate trail for bikes. Sharrows would be on the road.
I see what
Does that make sense?
yes.
Yeah. So this is just kind of laying out the pros and cons, which is part of the feasibility study, to look at what are the positives of certain proposals and what are the negatives. For Route A1, again, it utilizes the existing Foundry Preserve trails, but on the one of the cons of that is that not all of those trails allow bicyclists. So bicyclists would potentially have to walk bikes through there, or dismount and walk their bikes through. The other issue is that, well, another positive is that this would connect to the train station and Lower Cold Spring Village. So it connects that part of the village to the trail, but this is not our favored route, again, because it has more of a focus on visitors rather than residents, in our opinion. And then for Route A2, would start, as we said, right there at Bank Street and Chestnut Street, yeah. And cross Foundry Brook from there, and that allows also through the salmon, the salmon route that allows for a lot of connectivity to Cold Spring Village, Nelsonville, the lower part of the village as well. And then it also is a flatter terrain. So the route from Foundry Preserve is quite steep in certain areas. But this is basically a flatter terrain that would be easier for people to navigate, for different types of users to navigate. And then we already talked about some of the issues with Route A3, that if one were to accommodate bikes there, again, it would be obviously not on the sidewalk. You'd have to do something different. And that would be a Sharrows type thing.
Can I ask you to say something again in a different way, so that I mean, it doesn't have to be so different, I just need to hear it again. The green is, tell me what the green is again.
Green, which green?
That one, that part?
So that is, and I might need help from Laura here, but that is basically showing a route that goes along the marsh.
Yeah, it's actually, if you go to the next slide,
You'll be able to see
I think
that.
it's a different number. So that it's one up. Yeah, so it's that same color green, it's B4. And it's that we looked at a route all along
instead
the
of-
marsh. So
okay.
we start at Foundry Preserve and then hug the marsh on state land down. And we didn't put it forward as a favored route for a number of reasons, including a sensitive ecological environment, the fact that to be on state land could end up being on a platform that could be very, very expensive. There's a really big topographical difference between the marsh and the road and all of the village amenities. So from a resident perspective, it didn't help you get from short point A to point B. It was much more of a long scenic way to go the whole distance. And from the kind of resident usability perspective, it wasn't as useful as being close to 90. So that one's before.
Yeah, so then this is showing area B, which is that the North 90 section. And So Laura just talked us through B4, which we're not recommending.
It's now off the table.
Pretty much, yes. And then we have also several other potential routes, and most of those, well, all three of the other ones go along 90 for some portion. So if you'd like more detail on this, we can talk through this. Is that something you would like to hear?
So talking further, looking at further south. I mean, I'm interested to see how things connect and how you're proposing to connect. So if I would like to spend a few more time. Yeah,
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Especially focus on the favored route. Unless
Yeah, that would be helpful.
We'll go back to the previous.
And maybe back to the big yellow dot, see where we proceed from there.
One more.
Okay, so from there, if you go to the next slide.
From there, you're going over the bridge.
Boundary Brook, yes.
Well, or whatever thing you're using to get over Foundry Brook.
And then we are pretty much along 90, and it has not been determined which side of 90 this would be. And so our favorite route, favored route is Route B1. Although we're still exploring that, but that basically goes along 9 and then it crosses over to Boscobel. If we wind up being on the Manitou side of the street, it would cross to Boscobel and then go through Boscobel's land. Boscobel's very interested in working on this with us and working on a trail. It would go through Boscobel's land and come out onto Indian Brook, basically.
So through that wooded area where the hiking trails are.
Basically, yes. But potentially entering Boscobel's property where the wall is. I don't know if you know
That brick wall.
There's a brick wall. There's already an existing path there behind the brick wall. And it would kind of hug along 90 and then go through the woods and out to Indian Brook.
Okay.
Let's see, can I do this?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are you going to have north and southbound moving things all over the same path? How wide is this path supposed to be?
Or do you know the?
I don't know the numbers, but there are, so what we've been told from DOT is if we can follow their kind of design guidance that's required on a state road, and we can come up with all of the funding ourselves and the rights of way, then they will permit it. Which is a lot of ifs, but I think good news just to hear that that's the pathway, but it's to say that there's a requirement of a minimum size that we would have to meet on a road to be permitted.
Do you envision it like a standard, like a rail trail where there's a line down the center and you know that you go in the same direction as cars, right? You're staying right.
I don't think we've gotten to the point of what it looks like exactly.
It's less about what it looks like and
but
more
it
about
would
how
be,
people.
but it would be both directions, and then having a barrier, a safety barrier between the path and the road.
That's what you meant, right? Like a rail trail.
Yep, Jeff.
Okay, and then this is the area between basically Boscobel and the town of Phillipstown Park that you're seeing here. And again, we have two routes going along 9D. We have one, well, mostly along 90, one going through St. Basil's property potentially, and we're still talking with them about that. We don't have a favored route here because we don't have any commitments for a route on going through the St. Basil's property, but these are just some potential places where the path could go.
So is it, excuse me for interrupting, that when you're looking at the town park, where are the playing fields? Is the trail closer to the river than the? Oh yeah, never mind. Now I see the river. Yeah.
The medium blue in the middle
Okay.
is going through St. Basil. And then the one to the left, all the way to the left is a very rugged
around it,
path
yeah.
that is also on St. Basil property, but close to the river. And then the third, all the way to the right, is along the road.
So the playing fields are where the green dot is,
Yes. Mhm.
okay? Is the black line just a boundary for the park? What's that black? Yeah,
I believe so. Is that?
I don't actually, maybe, I'm not sure what that is.
okay. Oh, it looks like a property line or something, there's another one at the top.
Okay, and then this is the last part, area D. And so again, D3 is along 9D. And D2 would go down to the train station. And then, yeah, it goes down to the train station. And I'm having trouble seeing this from here. And then I think it's showing, what we're also showing from the Garrison train station, that there is a trail, an existing trail that goes up to the rec center that we would be able to connect with from the train station. Or there's the possibility of just staying on 90 and going all the way down to the rec center that way, if that makes sense to people. So it's showing this 3 different possibilities. D1 is, again, would continue the trail along the river. You'd have, and we have another option on 9D, and then we have an option that goes down to the train station, then circles back using the existing trail network that is behind the rec center. Maybe if there's any questions, we should stay on the maps before we move on to just talk about where we are and where we're going.
So in terms of things like securing rights of way, how is that? Would you be purchasing easements? Would the town be purchasing easements? How would that work?
So that is something that would be figured out during the planning phase of this next phase, not during the feasibility study. So that's really way down the road for us.
So
And
you're first laying out the path, the trail, the line it will follow. You're not thinking about, at this stage, you're not thinking about what you would need to do to approach particular property owners, whether it's the state or St. Basil or.
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations and lots of community engagement to start to get a sense of where there's greatest interest. And this very early kind of small feasibility study starting to map that out, but we don't have right-of-way information, especially along 9D. So that's we need to identify what's a small section that we want to take to design, which is when we would need to do surveys and understand, could a path actually fit here? And then start talking with neighbors. So
This is really a long way off.
Really a
Is that
long
what-
way off.
And right now the maps, I mean, the lines on the map that you're seeing are based on GIS. They're not based on actually looking at deeds and,
Yeah.
well, and actually figuring out rights of way. That would have to happen in the next phase with more funding and resources.
But if there's a line on an institutional property, like I'll say particularly basketball, that's one where we've already heard that they would be interested in working with us on developing a path there. And then otherwise, much of it is on 9D, and that's again where the goal is to be in the 9D right of way, but we just don't know yet where that is and what exactly is feasible.
So what are you looking for tonight in terms of feedback?
I think this was more just an update to say, hey, this conversation is going on and we'd love to continue engaging with the village in this conversation. And just to kind of lay out where we are, we presented to the town board, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think. And so we just wanted to come and update you on the process and just kind of let you know the timeline, answer any questions that you have at this time.
You have yet does your consultant have a sense of what an actual timeline would look like? Like
Yes.
where those phases fall in time?
Yes, so not with actual years or months put to it, but a general outline, yes. So.
I remember seeing 1 to 2 years.
At the end, there's another one at the end, yeah.
If you're interested in any of the community feedback, they're on these slides, people can look at that, but just very briefly, that we've heard a lot of support. There's also some concerns, and we've also heard this broader message loud and clear that there's really a need for more town focus on safe transportation and alternative transportation. So that has come up again and again in the context of these conversations that we've been having and also the feedback sessions. But just in terms of timeline, so here we are. And then, so feasibility study, we're wrapping this up this spring. It will go to the town board. And then we'll get submitted to the funder. Then we need to.
Who is the funder?
Greenway. Then we need to think about next steps. We need to have a conversation with the town, the village, about potentially if we're interested, if people are interested in us moving ahead on perhaps seeking funding for planning and design for a chunk of this trail. That's why we've kind of divided it into 4 different sections, because it's obviously not something that can all be done at once. And we've heard a lot of interest in the Cold Spring to Boscobel portion of the trail, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah, for people to access the farmer's market. People are already doing that now. They're walking on 90 and it's an unsafe situation. So
Also, under some of the versions of it linked to management, which is another thing that we've heard a lot from Cold Spring residents who want to walk one minute to school.
It's really, really hard to get across that intersection.
it's very hard.
I love that you guys are looking at the pathways along the roads, which are the most direct to the different community engagement points. And I think that putting the sort of more scenic, attractive marsh option to the side is smart, because, you know, it's if we're just talking about pathways that the community needs, these are useful, and the marsh is like going to become an attraction, as we all have heard, but we don't necessarily want to open up and add to.
It feels like, I think about in suburban Maryland and the rail trail in the most dense suburbs, and it looks very utilitarian. It looks like a path to get from one place to another. Not, some rail trails look very recreational and scenic, right? But that portion of the trail looks like a working trail. I think about that, to your point, that it's hard not to think about and be worried about how, just honestly, how this doesn't become an extension of however fjord ends up taking form. But I think the aim here, as I understand it, is community amenity and resident amenity, and finding ways for it to be kept distinct, I think, are really important. I mean, obviously you can't have someone checking driver's licenses at the entrance, but I think it needs to look like it serves the purpose that you're intending it to serve.
And I think also that it is linking spaces that residents use, but not so much visitors. Visitors are not so interested in going to Manitou School or that sort of thing, you know, or the Garrison School or the library. I mean, that's really how we've conceptualized it, as trying to link these places that we all use in our everyday lives, but maybe aren't interesting places for visitors.
And that points to the name you choose being very important. I don't know what that is,
Do you
but
have thoughts on that?
no, I don't right now, but I think it has to hold purpose.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. We've played around with a lot of different names, but Yeah, so if there is interest in moving forward on a chunk, then the planning and design phase, that really much more intensive study would go on for several years. And then, there would still be the process of seeking funding for construction. There's a lot that still would need to happen here. So we're just, we're informing people, we're having conversations, we're getting feedback. We're trying to make sure that the various local governments are up to speed. That's why we're here tonight. And just to do outreach and say, we're happy to talk to anyone at any time about this and hear people's feedback. There's still ways that people can give feedback. They can submit any written comments to the Phillipstown Trails Committee. We have a website, our email is there. So we're happy to hear from people about their thoughts on this.
5 years seems very ambitious.
It probably is. It might have a plus at next to the 5, I'm not sure.
Any other questions or comments from the board? We don't have much public with us, but Judith, did you want to add anything? I would say that working with Larry Burke was really important, and with our fire chief in terms of thinking about safety and accessibility for them. If you have someone having a heart attack on the trail, they need to get to them. So early engagement with this team, early and frequent engagement with that team is really important.
I mean, I'd love to hear any thoughts you have at this point, if you have anything to share.
It's just difficult to decide because you haven't decided what exact trail you're gonna use. When if you knock it down to 2 different ones, you're gonna choose one or the other, then we can look at it
Yeah.
as a group
And-
with the emergency services and say, this would maybe be better to get to than we can with this one. We can get in more in depth on that.
That'd be really helpful.
Sure.
I mean, we have to consider things like what vehicles do we have that can, in the same way we have to think about what can get up the mountain, they'll need to think about what they can get down the trail to help.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
what
that's
happened to
another.
that BMW bicycle?
Still have
BMW bicycle, not on the asset list.
Take it out of the
Still in the
garage.
garage. That was when we had
Not on the
like-
asset list.
It probably is on the
valuable.
asset list, I'm sure it is. I didn't turn my head to look to see if anyone was signaling from the Zoom audience. No, not even Michael.
Wow.
I
think he's heard it before.
I to the town.
I would love to be able to move to get to the farmer's market in a safer way. I've always wanted the farmer's market to be in the village. Such a bummer when it went from Butterfield. It's beautiful at Boscobel, but it was really easy for people to get to in the village. And making it a safer trip would be great. I'm interested to see how this develops. I mean, it's obviously you're not at a point of decision making now, but I'm glad to be informed and I'm interested to see where you go with it.
Great. Thank you.
One recommendation I would make is that you be really clear in how you're talking about that salmon colored portion of your slide. Because at first blush, that looks like improvements to village streets, changes in village streets, which may at some point be appropriate when we have funding for them. But I think you can imagine how people would in their heads think, how are we paying for that? And is the village paying for that? So I'd be really clear about the language you use there. I get it. You have to get over a village street to get to the starting point.
Yes.
And at some point, we want all of our streets, we hope all of our streets are safer pedestrian areas, but that's not what you're not doing that at this stage, Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming in.
you. Sure.
And speaking of ambitious, I'm not gonna go through it in detail tonight, but Jeff, in his capacity as keeper of agendas, has very helpfully, in a very helpful way, taken our external deadlines that we have to meet, related to the code update and budget, and plugged those in and then built out from there. This will probably change a number of times as we as our work ebbs and flows and as we need to add for budget, et cetera. But that's sort of a rough sense of where we're going to be for the next couple of months.
Can I ask a couple questions? So there's a Tuesday in here. Follow up with ad hoc committee on short-term rentals is on 2/21.
Yeah, so the chair of that working group, Jen Zwarek, is concerned about getting that wrapped up before we head into deep visitor season again, and asked if there was a possibility to have another working session on another evening. Are folks open to that possibility? Are you at Yale? You're at Yale?
No, it's the monthly meeting of the Trails Committee.
Oh, okay.
So I would have to choose between two places. So my preference would be a different day. if others are-
Agreed. Also, back-to-back meetings, I don't think is that great.
Mardi Gras party.
Okay, so I'm not.
Wow, so which date are we talking about now?
The 21st.
221 and 222.
How
What about the Thursday?
I could do
Yeah, the
23
20th.
or 20.
That's a Monday, this court.
You have to, I'm not sure about the court calendar. On February 20th.
What's your concern, Tweet, of back to back?
Yeah, I mean, I know that I will have conflict 100%. Doing it back-to-back. For
Yeah, I
sure.
think we could, the ad hoc committee, the short-term rentals, we could also do on the 1st with the preliminary budget meeting if we keep it to 20 minutes, half hour.
Keep which portion of 20 minutes, the budget? or the
Short-term
long-term rental?
rentals.
See if Jen thinks that it'll fit in there. I mean,
Yeah.
we're down to a smaller number of decision points. It might be possible, but
Can I also, I have a conflict on the first, so just, do you explain a little bit more what the preliminary budget meeting, how substantive, how big of a deal is it if I miss that, is the question I want to know.
it is only the beginning.
It's the start. That first meeting is typically, this is what the budget is. This is the tax rate. This is what we can increase, why. And with some basics and some top line, it's the following week.
Okay, so if I watch the video afterwards and learn about it,
Absolutely.
it's not like there's big decisions.
There'll be no decisions other than really it's maybe establishing what the tax, what the increase will be or what goes into play, what goes into that.
Okay, adjust that number.
Yeah.
I will say Michelle is excellent at sitting down with you one-on-one. If you have particular things you want to understand better or want explained further. So if you were to need a follow-up after listening to the meeting, I'm sure she would accommodate you. I do want to say that Michelle is singularly focused on budget at this time of year, and I have to remind myself, just reminding everybody that we need to give her the space she needs to get us to those deadlines. So just to be mindful of asks of her. Anything you want us to talk about in particular here?
I do have
Just laying
budget,
it out.
budget and code update are the two. There are no deadlines we can't move.
It's helpful to see it.
So
Okay, so
everything else, we're talking about parking, short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Those are our deadlines that we're trying to. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
those are the places where we have give.
those have to be the second priority at the budget and code update.
Got it.
And code update, just so everybody knows, if we don't get all this work done, it's approximately $20,000 in reimbursement that we will not get from the state, from the cert.
So there's no shifting.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna get back to us on the short-term rentals.
Yep.
One last call for public comment. We good? Make a motion to adjourn. Who seconded? Laura?
Second.
Favor? Oh. Aye. Aye.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.